So, welcome back to I Think Tomorrow. We are getting back into things after having, I want to say a summer break, but that's not really true. We have been working most of this summer, but we haven't been doing a lot of content. And to kick things off, I'm here again with my co founder, Thomas. Say hi, Thomas.
Hello.
And we want to have a little bit of an informal conversation and give you a window into what it's like to build a business now, build an agency using AI, using new technologies, but then also just to bootstrap our own company. Thomas, I'll maybe turn it over to you. What has it been like to do business development, get clients, to work with clients, and how has that maybe differed from you've had plenty of startup experience? So how has it differed from your past experience?
Right. So I think we're having slightly different experiences because I've had, as you just mentioned, like my own. I started my own business, my first one 8 years ago. It was never meant to be something very big, but it grew and still alive actually. And then I had the second experience with like proper startup with venture capital and trying to scale it, etc. And then having to report to investors. And this time around, it feels very different because even though we are kind of proactively thinking of ways we can productize some of the things that we're doing and ways in which we can sort of start, like we having conversations around building teams and structuring those teams and like but the sort of where we think like you and I could be adding value a year from now and like what we could delegate. Still, it feels very much like I'm selling my own expertise. I'm having to speak to these clients, and I'm actually getting very involved with like in the exploration phases, in the execution phases. And it is true that we're just now starting to work with people that are helping us, you know, in different aspects of what we're trying to deliver. Like with right now, for example, we have someone helping us with the technical side of things. It feels very rewarding in a way because it's the knowledge that I have, and it's me talking directly to the client, and and then we can talk a little bit more about like how we started with the biz dev and like what is it that we want to do, and like some of the we talked about productizing certain things.
That's interesting. So if I play that back to you, it's kind of rather than selling a product first, the fact that we are like a service-based organization, it means that we're selling ourselves. We're selling our expertise, our brains, and there is like that personal validation, right? That comes along with somebody deciding to hire us. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's that, and also the fact that you're much more in control of what you're going to build. I think, especially like compared to my startup experience, obviously, none of the decisions that you make regarding like where you want the startup to be 5 years from now are, I mean, I had to decide all of this, right? But then I had to negotiate it with other people, with like a bunch of co-founders and a bunch of investors, etc. And at some point, I was doing things, just things that I had promised my investors I would do, just to be able to get the money, and then I had to execute on those things. And like, shit, and then feels very different from. I mean, you talked about bootstrapping, right? This time around, we'll get to grow it organically. And so I feel much more satisfied about, because at every step of the way, I'm learning new things about what I want this business to be, right? I don't have to make sort of a rushed decision in 4 months to raise like X amount of, and then make a few sort of decisions, write them on paper, and then execute on those decisions. Like, this is actually like, 12 months down the line, you're going like, is this really what I wanted my company to be? Or am I just like, kind of reactively, or not reactively, but like, am I just doing things I promised I would do when I didn't have enough information, right?
Very interesting.
And it feels much more rewarding in that sense because I feel like I'm going to be in control of everything that we're building, as I learn new things, if that makes
It
sense.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, the fact that we're bootstrapping, which I think you kind of need to do with a service-based organization, it's much harder for good reason to raise money. But it does mean that we retain full ownership, and therefore we get to own the decisions in a way that we wouldn't if we had outside investors. I think for me, uh, it's been really interesting working with you. We've said from the beginning that I'm kind of more the product person and you're more the biz dev person. And I feel like I've learned a lot from working with you. And before this, I should say, I worked with a few potential co-founders on some more product ideas. So not service-based organizations. I also, right before we started, I had one particular product idea that I was taking forward largely myself. I had a co-founder, but he had a full-time job, so I was really leading it. And I think the thing that you've shown me is like, especially in that first stage, especially to get your first client, like just how hard you have to push and how many no's you have to get, how many things you have to try. And it's really tough. I mean, it's tough for me at least, not to get discouraged because, right, like it feels like before, like I would test, I for the product, I'd put out like a landing page and I'd test some ads, etc. And like I took, I knew that I had to try a lot of things. I knew how to push hard, but it was at the same time, it was difficult for me not to take like a non-response or like a not significant response, like getting like nobody to fill out a survey or getting nobody to try the product or sign up. I took it kind of personally. I was like, this is a bad idea. I'm failing, etc. And I think you taught me that, no, like just with any idea, the first steps, like you're going to meet so much resistance and so much confusion, even like you have to figure out how to communicate what you do. Also, people need multiple touch points in order to get from, not knowing and just discovering who you are to actually be ready to, buy your services for the first time. And that just takes a lot of time, a lot of pushing. I remember I forget what podcast it was on, but somebody was saying that like the norm is for people to have many interactions, have to build trust over time in order to buy your service. So initially, you're really looking for those few kind of, for lack of a better word, like crazy people who are going to like hear what you do and be like, yeah, sure. Like that sounds great. Which is, I mean, if you think about it, it is sort of an insane response. Like most people are not going to do that. And so just going through that process with you was incredibly eye-opening. But then also now that we have some traction, seeing once you get that first client, once you get the first yes, once you have a bit more of a proven track record and you have proof points that you can share with others, how the momentum builds and how it really does get a lot easier to sell follow-on projects, to continue going forward. And that's also incredibly gratifying because I feel like we've started that like ramp up. I knock on wood that it continues, but it makes all of that, initial period worthwhile.
Yeah, and you've mentioned something. I mean, we've heard probably like I heard this years ago, and it's just been very present in many conversations about startups and starting your business, which is the concept of the FFFs, right? Which is I don't think we've talked about that. No? Okay, so the FFFs are family, friends, and fools.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you have something there.
So, I mean, when you in theory, but then I think one of the most interesting things to witness as we started developing the idea of Odyssey together. By the way, we haven't talked about exactly what it was at the beginning and what it ended up doing and how we can talk about how it was just something very non-committal at the beginning, which is I recommend everybody to start it like this, right? Like you just start with it's just an idea.
Oh,
It's just
here, do you want to maybe just
but
share?
like let me
Okay,
get that first. Like, but one of the most interesting things to witness is we all know the theory, we all know the like FFFs, right? Like first that your first few clients are going to be like family, friends, and fools, and
fools being those crazy people I
yeah,
was
that's
talking
crazy
about.
yeah. And I could see the resistance in your eyes. It's like, I don't want to have to expose myself to my network because I don't even know this idea is like
It's terrifying.
fully realized.
It's terrifying.
And I'm like, what are going to think of me, etc. It's like, I mean, and I can't remember exactly like the types of conversation. I think it was a lot of it came from a lot of the. I think there was a sense of like you saw how I was doing things, and they were like, you felt guilty. It was like I need to be pushing harder, and then I would ask you, hey, Mike, how many leads or something? It was like, and then 5 days later, you'd be like, actually, Thomas, can we change the strategy? Can we approach people that we don't know? And then you actually offer a solution. You'd be like, okay, we need to think like, what is our target audience and how like what is our value proposition? How are we going to communicate this? And then eventually you came around to the idea of exposing yourself to your own network, and that's when we started making business.
And it's a very good point. But I do think like you hit, or you're at least dancing around kindly, something real, which was like I needed that time to like deal with my own insecurity, right? And I remember at the beginning, you would just like you like put these like grand announcements. I mean, I say grand, they were just announcements, but on LinkedIn. And like, I would feel like a knot in my stomach because I'd think about doing that myself. And I really found it terrifying for the exact reasons you were saying. Like, and I don't want to say that I didn't believe in this, but it is, when you start out, it's an experiment. You don't know if it's going to work. You don't really know until you test it if it's a good idea. And right, like the process of making it a good idea. And this is something I knew in theory, but now I really learned for the first time myself in practice, is it's not thinking and thinking your way to the exact right idea.
Right.
It's putting something initial, imperfect out in the world, seeing how people react to it, and then adjusting. And that initial step, because it is imperfect, is terrifying. And sometimes you post something on LinkedIn and like nobody reacts to it. And that non-response is like, in a way, it was gut-wrenching to me. And that
and then you had this thing in Paris.
Yes, no, you're gonna say the same thing. And then it's funny because I posted like nobody responded, and then I had
They did respond.
So I got a few responses, but then I went to my business school 10-year reunion, and saw a ton of people that I haven't seen in forever, and every single person I spoke to, and it wasn't even just here, it's been like since then, or like in other contexts, every single person I spoke to, even ones that I hadn't talked to in probably 10 years, were like, congratulations, wow, you started an agency. Not only did they know, but they were, because of the way we talked about it, and I was really following your lead here, like you immediately spoke about Odyssey like it was something real, like it was something significant, like it was something to be proud of, rather than, I think if I were doing it alone, I would have been like, oh, I'm shooting myself in the foot, like, I'm doing this little thing, just testing it, don't, maybe if you could be so kind, just like click on this link, like, but it's really nothing. It's not my full-time job. Like I would caveat it in a million ways. So that I wasn't really putting myself on the line, but like people follow your lead there. So if you put something out that is that cautious, people aren't going to take you seriously. If you put something out like you encourage me to do, like you do yourself, and we had every reason to be proud and take seriously what we're doing. People follow your lead on that. They believe you. And when I went to this reunion, that's how everybody reacted. And to the point where like, by the 20th time it happened, I was like, wait, like, why does everybody, like, they almost believe in it. Like, now I don't want to say more than me. I really believe in what we're doing, but like, it gave me like renewed faith.
Right. But I need to give a little bit of context so that we, because I understood where you were coming from. We started Odyssey, even though I pushed really hard from the beginning to make it sound like it was something real, because that's how I go about things, and that's how I know. Like my experience tells me that that's the only way you can really make them work, right? Like it can be something completely fake, but then you really have to make it sound like it's something real, at least in your head, that you have a clear vision. And then like, because how many people have I seen like raise $60 million just with a PDF, right? Because it's real in their minds and they see it, and that's what people buy, right? But when we started, just to give a little bit more context, I was just sort of like, I had like the hint of a client there who like needed my services. I was kind of like helping him pro bono. And then I was working for a consultancy firm, and I knew that this was the natural next step for me. I wanted to be doing something in consultancy and with tech and product building and stuff. And you were kind of also, I
had been working on that product idea, and at that point I was looking to do product consulting on the side, not necessarily as my main thing, and as a supplementary source of income.
Exactly.
While I continued with product building as like the primary focus of my work.
Exactly.
So I think the point you're making, and I think it's true, is that for both of us, it wasn't necessarily we're going to start an official agency.
We just needed an extra source of income. We wanted to keep it like non-committal. And I said, look, why don't we build a brand around this, and whatever we catch, we put it up, and whatever we catch in our nets, we'll just like whatever you got, you'll take it. If I can help you, fine. And then we kind of like started doing biz dev. And through just doing so much biz dev, we realized that like, I actually like working with this guy. Like, I don't just want to build a brand and then whatever. Like, I actually, if I get a client, because I enjoy working with Mike so much. If I get a client, I actually want to work with him. But I was sad. It made me sad to think. Like, there was a point where I was like, oh, I don't want to get clients because that means that we all work together. Work together. I was like, how counterintuitive or counterproductive. Like, I should have a clear incentive to get clients, because that's the whole point of what we're doing. And what's stopping me from wanting to get clients? The fact that I won't work with you. And so then we quickly realized that that's what we wanted to.
Well, and I think there was another layer to that, which was also the types of projects that we wanted to work on, and being at the forefront of figuring out how to apply this wave of new technology that is coming in to small and medium-sized enterprises, to businesses that might not have been able to afford custom software. Like, we were both very interested in that specific type of work, and those two things together, we were like, well, I mean, at least I had this experience of being like, well, then, like, why aren't we working together? Why aren't we building this as like a full business? And like, aren't we the ones that get to decide this? And I think maybe I was even like worried, like, that you didn't want to do that, even as I was realizing that that's what I wanted. And we both had that desire at the same time. And then finally we said it to each other, and we're like, okay, let me believe it.
And I really enjoy how you pushed in your own kind of very kind way, and a very structured way, to have us be aligned from the beginning, or at least after like a month or so, on what is it that you can do, what is it that I can do, what is it that we want to do, and then what can we align this? Because we iterated. We started with like funding for a company, until we realized, no, this is what we really want to do, this is what we can do. And then you took a very systematic approach to aligning those, and then being very precise about our value proposition. And I think it's worked out fantastically, because it really aligns with our experience. And and then you took that approach from the very beginning.
100%. I'm gonna push. I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. I want to push us forward a bit. So now I want to talk about that new technology. So when we think about AI and the types of and building custom software for clients. How have you actually, now that we're working with real clients, how have you found it is to work with the new AI tools? How are clients using them? How are they like more or less useful in practice versus when we were kind of making that initial sales pitch and like kind of selling the capabilities?
Right. I think I can, if I need to sort of summarize it in a way, this is not my own idea, by the way, but it made sense immediately to me when I heard it. And I think you shared it with me. A lot of people think, oh, we're companies, they go, oh, we're investing in R&D. You're not really investing in R&D. Like the LLMs, the financial models are there and they exist and they do all the work already, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just utilizing, you're like picking things that they can do. You're not really developing that yourself.
Yes.
Right? It's like saying, I mean, what would be a good analogy? But it's like saying that you're doing R&D because you're implementing Excel, and then you're not doing your calculations with a calculator and the paper and pen, right?
Yeah.
That's not R&D. You just kind of getting tools that exist, and then it is true that there's more flexibility to what LLMs can do. Like the possibilities are a little bit like, I mean, they're not as guided, but it does not feel like R&D, right? I don't know. How do you feel about this?
I mean, I guess it's a fine line. So I agree with what you're saying. It's like a lot of the 95% of the capabilities. Let me take a step back. Depends on the specific use case and the specific thing that we're talking about building. And in some cases, there's things that we're doing for clients that are not fundamentally related to LLMs. I would say a large percent is, but not everything. When we are talking about LLMs, I do agree with you. I think that the models, the core models themselves do most of the heavy lifting. And obviously that's not R&D that we're investing in or that our clients are investing in. I do think that missing layer though between connecting the LLM to because you need to meet clients where they are, right? Like it's much, much harder to get somebody to like go outside of their normal workflow and then paste something into ChatGPT, et cetera, get the output and then kind of go back to their normal workflow versus, and this is a lot of what we're doing, building an integration so that the LLM can be plugged into whatever that workflow is in a native way. And that does require, it's the amount of investment, capital, et cetera, that, and this is kind of the beauty of it, that you need to build that connector is like minuscule compared to all of the R&D that went into the development of the LLM. However, it's still like it's still code. It's still
Engineering.
It's still engineering. It's still technically, especially when we build it custom, intellectual property that doesn't belong to OpenAI. It belongs to us and our clients.
Yeah. That is a very good point. And so do you want to give specifics or on some of like the things that I think like we are talking about very abstract things.
Yeah, like give me examples from clients of, and I don't, it doesn't even need to be things that we build, right? Like when you see in a work environment, and I'm much more interested, not necessarily in like your personal use of ChatGPT or whatever at work, but with clients, like what's easier, what's harder, what's happening versus what's not happening. What are clients not doing that you might expect they would be doing with AI? And yes, I mean, I guess we'll anonymize, but to the degree that you can give specific examples would be great.
So far, I might. As we progress, like we might be able to come up with more patterns, but I've identified 3 sort of general patterns in terms of like the asks we get from clients, right? One is building things end to end, and us utilizing the power of Gen AI to be able to build much faster, right? It's work that like we wouldn't be able to do without a team of 10 engineers to deliver in the timelines that we're offering. We're able, like, through sort of smart users. So we're actually the ones using the Gen AI to be able to do all of these things, right? Like the clients, like they don't even they don't care that like
How it's happening. We're using it to build cheaper than we would have previously.
Exactly. That's one thing. Another thing that I found is,
and that's interesting because in that case, like there is, you're substituting capital in the form of like the LLM's R&D for labor.
Yes.
Before this, we would have had to have a much bigger team.
Exactly.
But that's all happening on our side. It's not happening. The client kind of doesn't see that,
Exactly.
except for the fact that like the cost to them is much lower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I never thought of it like that. That's really interesting. Yes.
So that's one sort of pattern that I've identified. Then the second pattern is, yes, clients that want to leverage AI. They want to introduce. They understand what AI. They use it personally, and then they understand that AI can really help them from improving logistics through like advanced data processing, or like bots that so for customer support, and then sort of internal summarizing of like what's happening, etc. So like the teams can organize themselves better. So that is sort of a second use case, right? Like, or in which we might or might not build things with AI. We do usually, but like the type of work we do is more about like the identifying the use cases, really understanding if there's like what the impact is. We behave more like product managers, right? Where we like, it's less about the implementation, although yes, we do execute on that, but it's more about the conceptualization. Like we're really like sort of understanding your flow, really testing ideas against like what is it that you want to achieve, like what do you want your business, how do you want it to improve, and then us conceptualizing it, and then you execute. But the most important bit is conceptualizing, like really understanding where in those flows AI.
It's very strategic. Anyways.
So that's two, and then a third one, although it's not as common, is people that are building stuff with AI. Because I think Gen AI is really good, like especially when you build stuff with AI, it's very good at like the latest tools are very good at like coming up with beautiful interfaces, like interfaces that look functional but then have no substance. Right. There's no real connection to your own systems and like to your payment platform and to whatever database, etc. And we step in to sort of sort out the backlogs, the back end, sorry. And so these are the three patterns that I've seen emerge.
You've never said that to me before, and I really like it. I think that's true. I also find that the most, I don't know if you'd agree, somehow like the easier projects, or at least the projects that are most fun for me, are actually maybe that first button.
Yes.
Because then we just get to build, and we get to build using these tools, and like inevitably people are quite impressed. And I don't want to say it's easy, because I do think that like real skill goes into it. But you're able to iterate, and
I mean, it seems easy because you and I have both worked with like teams of engineers, and we know how difficult it, like human error.
Yes.
It's just like you have to organize things, and then you have to have your sprints, etc. With AI, it's 24/7. maybe one day you're not inspired at all, but the next morning you're on fire, and then you're like prompting away, and all your prompts are fantastic. You're like comparing what Claude gives you with what ChatGPT is structuring, what then you put like, and then and it just works, and it gets you,
Yes.
and then it asks you questions back, and then you're both on. Whereas as opposed to having to build this with a team of 20 engineers.
And I mean, I think also a lot of the taking it from that, I mean, prototyping with AI and then being able to take it from that initial prototype to something that can be tested truly in production, especially when it's client facing. That there's quite a bit of work that has to go into that too, which I also enjoy, right? Like that is for me figuring out how do we use these new tools to actually like really plug into actual customer facing products, to workflows, internal workflows that our clients are using. And I really enjoy that. I will say that I think the thing I'm working with a client right now in almost like a fourth bucket, which is really purely product advisory. And even that, because, in all my work now, I try to approach it asking like, okay, like how can we use these new tools? Like, and I've worked as a product manager for years. Consolidating information, sharing information is much easier. I'm working with a small consultancy here in Spain, but then we have like the end client for both of us is a very large fintech company with a consumer app that is used by like many, like a very large app. I don't think I should give more information than that. And it's a company that I've experienced at Shopify and Amazon. It feels more like on the scale of Amazon when we're working with them. And I went into it. So it's the first time since I've worked at Shopify and Amazon that I'm working again with a very large organization. And when I was working at Shopify and Amazon, LLMs were, when I left Shopify, kind of in their infancy. So people, or the ChatGPT style LLMs were just being used day to day in workflows. And I came into it very hopeful and very excited to think through, okay, like how can I use, just in my day-to-day work and the work with the teams, how can I use these new tools to work faster, to work better? And I really feel that bubble was burst almost immediately, right? Like it is so much harder to come in to, a large organization that has established ways of working, to, especially when these tools are like not, we're working in Slack. Does Slack have some AI integrations? Of course. I really find that in all of the main like workflow management tools, I'm talking very broadly, like Slack, Google Docs, Notion, even when Notion I feel like is pretty AI forward, like the integrate the like in workflow AI integration is so much more primitive and less advanced than I would expect. Like it's really, there's no sort of like, maybe there's some sort of like test versions of this. There's no like magic buttons in Google Docs and in Notion, etc., to get immediate AI help or feedback in a very useful way. Like I am sad about how much time I spend like pasting back and forth between ChatGPT and like a Google Doc or Notion. And that really, especially when you're working with large teams, it makes it really difficult to be AI native in the way that you work. And so, I after seeing this, I feel like for large organizations, I think they're going to be way slower at using AI to transform the way they work than than I expected before.
What is, I mean, you talk about using AI to transform the way you work, but you seem to put a little of the focus on sort of individual basis, right? As opposed to integrating AI into sort of larger or like broader workflows, right? And
It's
so,
a really good point.
right. So I mean, I
I
think
think
there's
this is
things to be said about both.
I think what I'm talking about, to clarify, it's a really good point. This is more like a grassroots approach. Like, can a individual team use AI to work better, work faster within a large organization that hasn't necessarily invested in those like foundational changes? And I think that's very hard. I do think that like if an Amazon, if Shopify, if another large organization top down identifies a new way of testing AI, of using AI, of building an automation across that they can then roll out across the organization, that has a lot of chance for impact. But it has to be more top down and more integrated into the way that that organization is already used to working.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because okay, we talk about AI and you talk about Amazon, right? So what are the limits of what AI is? Amazon has already sort of automated whether the driver is looking at the road or like they have cameras in their vans, so that like it's constantly monitoring the eyes of the driver, and obviously there's artificial intelligence that goes into building a model that sort of identifies where your eyes are pointing at you, right? So there's a lot of like image recognition, etc. So has Amazon adopted AI? Yes. Then there's a lot of AI, like that data analysis that goes into predicting demand at each warehouse, so that like when when moving goods around a specific country, then you're like, well, this region is a little bit rainier, so umbrellas, and it's got like this bad weather prediction, and so we're going to move certain like items to this. Amazon already does this, right? That's like, it's data analysis. Like, I mean, we think about AI now with as Gen AI, but there's people have been doing and working out this sort of complex logistics models already for a very long time, and image recognition that are not necessarily Gen AI, right? And so when you say implementing AI, what do you mean?
So it's a really good point. I think it's just fun. I think we haven't really talked about this before, so even I'm working through this live. There is a thesis that, and I think a lot of companies are working towards using AI as like a drop-in remote worker. So really replacing humans as knowledge workers, right? And like when I think about my job as product manager, both at Amazon and in Shopify, I was doing remote work before the pandemic. Like, it is a good candidate for that drop-in remote worker. And I think what I've seen is we are very, very far because of all of the different tools, all of the different current softwares, the different people you have to interact with, the knowledge of the organization, etc. We are very far from AI being able to automate even 20% of what I was doing as a product manager, let alone as a drop-in remote worker, let alone 80 or 100%. I think for specific types of knowledge workers, engineers, probably accountants and lawyers, etc. Like, we've even seen this. We haven't hired a lawyer or an accountant because it's like way easier to like write a contract or like figure out tax shit just using ChatGPT. I think for those specific workers, you will probably get something that's close to a drop-in worker much sooner. But even there, like, you know, and I'm a big fan of this idea that we're automating tasks, we're not automating jobs. Like, you're still going to need the, you know, kind of umbrella level accountant directing the AI agents to do their work right and make sure, and like kind of validating and putting a human in the loop in certain places. So with that thesis of like we're close to a drop-in remote worker, my experience thus far these past few months makes me much less bullish. You know, I think that it's going to be a much slower build up to that. Where I think there is a lot of opportunity is like the more traditional R&D you're talking about. Like, how do we use AI, the current capabilities of LLMs, not maybe to like replace humans, but to innovate products? Which is like, I think you hear less about that, you know, but I think it is the way that AI has been used for the AI, machine learning, whatever, has been used to date. And I think that we're gonna continue to see that accelerate. Like, I'm much more bullish on those types of applications versus like fully replacing humans. Excuse me, fully replacing humans.
Yeah. No, okay. Because I mean, there's two opportunities, and I think in the context of what we're doing at Odyssey, and by the way, if you want to ask me any questions, but I have an idea, because with our agency, with Focused, very much, I'm gonna make two different categories, right? Like implementing AI at an organizational level, and understanding workflows, and understanding where Gen AI can really impact to, you know, guide and sort out tasks for all the different people involved, and sort of break down the tasks so everybody knows what they need to do at every moment, which is something that we're working on right now. Or like, right, so sort of implementing AI in all the different workflows. Okay. But then there's also, as you were just mentioning right now, enabling each individual worker to use AI themselves, rather than like sort of take a top-down approach, like, we're going to introduce AI, but like, rather, how can we best educate?
It's really interesting, yeah.
You know, all the different employees that understand their own tasks and the sort of the scope of the responsibilities. How can we best enable them to you know, kind of be more AI native in that sense, right? And we haven't explored that.
We haven't, and but I think we're exploring it personally. But I'd love to like try to package that actually.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a really good idea. It's a really cool, interesting idea. And when I tell people that, you know, we're working in AI, and I get that question a lot. You know, like, are
you doing workshops?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, we have to think if that's because I do enjoy building.
Yeah.
First and foremost,
I would love doing workshops if there's a way. Like, sorry, I would love going in sort of in that direction where we are enabling each individual worker, so employees, so they can interact with AI better. If there's a way to productize it in a way, and I don't mean like another platform, another YouTube channel where like, today we're gonna like, no, like thinking of ways in which even building tools where, you know, there's got to be a way to productize.
I agree. I haven't thought about it a lot, but it's a really it's an interesting, I think there's a lot of value there. I think we have to decide if like that's something that, like, if that's a distraction from our kind of main offering or not.
I think I personally gonna be able to enjoy it more.
I feel like you're even better than me at just having like a very AI native personal workflow.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, sorry, I don't mean that, but like, I mean, I love everything that AI has to offer.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, right now, for example, I'm very much inside a project where I'm productizing. I'm adding AI to workflows, etc. But I really want to do is talk to each individual employee and tell them,
So
like,
interesting.
you know, this, you could be doing this, you could be doing that, etc. And I'm actually like in a lot of the calls that I've ended up having with them, it's like I explain to them how I work, and like, that's a really interesting, how cool that you could do is, etc. And then I'm like putting like like teaching them how I'm using all these different like knowledge tools from like Notion and exactly what I'm doing to like da da da.
But one question there, and we've run into this a little bit. I think one of the challenges I've seen is it makes it very easy for anyone to produce like a lot of content, a lot of information very quickly. And then that information has to be absorbed by another human that you're trying to communicate with.
Yeah.
And then that human is often just dumping all of that information into ChatGPT themselves and consuming it. So like in some ways you have like all of this LLM output that's then being like, that's partially you, but it's also like the product of the LLM. And then that's really essentially being passed back to an LLM so that it could be consumed by a human. Do you find, like, I think that can be sometimes challenging, and we're almost producing so much information that actual humans have a hard time consuming and processing it and actioning it.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I've taught my clients is, I mean, you probably noticed this, right? Like when you're working, for example, on Notion or Google Docs or whatever, and like the app, ChatGPT, the actual app that you install in your computer, understands that that's on in the background and that you've been like typing stuff. It automatically creates a link, even though you can force that link. It does it. You can enable it, and so you will see, and you can ask questions to it.
Yes.
Right. So we just had a meeting. I've recorded the meeting. I've got the transcript. I've made a like sort of a little short AI summary that I've kind of like edited or whatever. Like most of the time, I find myself deleting stuff.
Yes.
Rather than adding. So I'm deleting stuff, but then I tell them like, you can just, like, if there's something that's not clear or you don't exactly know what we talked about, or like what is it that you need to be doing, like what's the next actionable step for you. We just had like an hour-long conversation where I gave you like 3 very specific things, like in 3 different parts of the conversation. Ask the LLM, right? And also, if you're not sure, it's like extract the direct quotes that you got from the LLM, right? And that way, I mean, you can call me anytime, but you know, it's just going to be faster if you do it this way, right? And so that's a very specific example. Like, you don't need to. Yes, we are putting a lot of output out there, but you don't need to read the whole thing. Usually, you're coming to a document with 2 very specific perspectives, right? Like, you either go window shopping,
yes,
for information, or you know exactly what you need to buy, but you don't know where it is, right? If it's the second, ask,
yes,
and you'll get the answer, and that's a really efficient.
I think it's very interesting, because I think what I was saying was I'm skeptical that, you know, humans kind of facilitating passing information just back and forth between AIs who are doing most of the work and talking, like that is a negative, but you're actually saying it can be a positive.
Like,
we can cut this out. Chewing ice. Okay.
Yeah. What I mean to say, yes, it is true that there's a lot of AI fluff, you know, and even though there are better or best practices to be able to summarize that content and just be able to have not just generate content for the sake of generating content, and they're like, oh, we're just gonna have this meeting and I'm gonna create this summary, and then like ChatGPT is gonna give me like 3 very concrete next steps that no one's gonna read. You can still, like, if you're if you don't know what to do, it like I'm usually like, okay, I just had sort of I spent a week thinking deeply about the problems that my company is facing and brainstorming ways in which AI. And then I've had like 4 different meetings where I'm like, da, 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 and then actually it's like, I'm wondering, what are the specific metrics that I said that I was going to, that we thought, da, da, da. And then you probably 2 are in the front of your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you go back to the LLM, you've got all of that information exists somewhere, and then you can just ask it. It's like, give me this, the specific, and then if there were any reasons, given anybody quoted specific reasons to why something was important, tell me and convince me. Right?
I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll move us on, because we could also talk about this probably forever. But that makes sense to me. I guess my fear is that there's a lot of value in forcing yourself unaided to think through some of these things, to come up with the potential solutions yourself before you ask AI. And I do find that one of the downsides of AI, because it is like, it has so much information from everywhere, that it tends to give you a more predictable answer, versus like if you gave the same information, like if you gave the same prompt, the same inputs, the same prompt to like even the different, like to Claude versus ChatGPT, etc., you tend to get a pretty similar answer. Versus if you gave that same information to 10 different humans, and like let's just assume that they're relatively smart humans who like know the domain that you're asking, like you'll get, I mean, there'll be similarity, but you'll get much more variation.
Okay. So to be very specific, and we can move on, but when we say solutions, for example, to give a very specific example, we're trying to decide a roadmap. Like now that we've absorbed a lot of information about a specific company that we're working with, and we functionally we knew what we needed to build, and now we've kind of gone deeper into that
an operational roadmap.
Yeah. And then we've gone over the past few weeks, we've gone deeper into like the technical challenges, and now we're able to make sense of like what's realistic.
Yes.
To build based on, anyway. So obviously, I think the first draft you were aided by AI, and then somebody else like with a more sort of technical mindset, it was clearly aided by ChatGPT or like an AI within the process and whatever. And then I needed to make sense of it, and I knew, because like obviously there was a lot of human interference, like guidance. There was a lot of human guidance,
valuable human input.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Are you an AI?
I knew I tried to make sense of the solutions that had been suggested in that document with another AI, but then I hit a roadblock.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I actually needed to consult you to make sense of what the solutions were that I was and then I came up through that interaction with you, knowing that like it had gone through so many levels of like AI use, that I actually ended up being able, like testing things out with you, I was able to come up with like, 3 like novel ideas that I wouldn't have been able to produce with AI. Right. And so I think, like, the point that I'm trying to make here is that most of the stuff, like in most cases, AI is really helpful. And even though I have feared myself that like, what if I'm becoming lazy?
So actually, that's kind of part of what I'm getting at.
I've realized that no, when I actually do need human input, and when I know I can very much identify within myself that I'm getting frustrated with AI. Because it's still my judgment, still my judgments that looks at the idea as like, oh, I'm satisfied with this. Actually, rubbish, like, and this is why I needed to consult you.
So fair enough. I guess I would challenge that by saying that And for me, I just don't think that we haven't experimented, not just us, like humanity hasn't experimented in a rigorous way for long enough to know where LLMs in this sense are additive, where they really kind of help us come up with better solutions to work faster, versus potentially negative some, or they detract from the quality of the work. And I see the potential like negative in, I guess, maybe two main buckets. One would be, we know that like anchoring bias is a thing. So if you're going to an LLM originally to help you come up or ideate on solutions, and it's giving you sort of like the expected, maybe it's good quality, but it's not, it's going to be the most probable best answer to a question rather than a truly innovative solution, then you're going to be anchored in that. And everybody else that goes to the LLM is going to be anchored in that. And it's going to bias you more towards those types of predictable answers versus, and especially when you're trying to come up with novel solutions and test a bunch of different things, like if you only went to humans, like I think we're a bit better at like coming up with crazy ideas. If you did that unanchored by LLMs, I think it's an open question whether like, it's better to start with the LLM output or not. And then I think what was the other thing I was going to say? Helping to other houses too. I lost it. Anyway, it will come back to me. But that is an example of where I think that like LMs might actually detract from the quality of work. And I just feel like I don't have the data to like answer that question yet.
Okay. I'm not too worried about that. I was gonna say I don't fully agree, but like I agree. I'm not too worried.
Okay.
Because in the process of, we will get better at interacting with AI anyway. And something that I've noticed, how many times have I said this? There's a very simple 3-step process that I take with AI, right? When asking it to give me something, usually I use it to give me the first sort of framework. Like when I have to think about something, it's like I ask the LLM to give me sort of framework. Like what are the things that I need to take into account in order, and so. Then this 3-step is like first, like load it with a bunch of context, right? About who I am, like who am I, what my role is, what my intentions, what my objectives are. Then like load it with a bunch of information about the specific project that I'm like, just throw all the information in, and then give it like, you always have to give it an intention. Like what is it? What is the final outcome of like? So this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm trying to get to. Before you give me any solution, ask me a bunch of questions, right?
Yeah, I do that too, and I find that's very important.
And then I'll give like if it's missing context, I will just add the context that's missing, etc. And then I even sometimes end up doing like a second or third round of questions when I'm like, this actually ask me more questions about this because it's not fully clear in my mind.
By the way, I love this, and I love talking. I love doing that, and then using like the transcribe or voice feature to then just like speak unstructured back to AI, to the LLM, and have it help me like organize my random thoughts.
Exactly.
It's great at that. That's a really good point.
And then once you've populated all the answers and whatever, then you go to the next step, which is before you actually give me the output, write the perfect prompt, and it will output the prompt. And then I will copy the prompt, and then I will paste the prompt, and I will start changing exactly what is it that I need to do, right? Now I understand exactly how the LLM is interpreting what I'm asking of it, and it's giving me the raw output of like what it things that I need from it, and then I can modify it, and finally I get a really good output. And I feel that that's very much my own. I feel like I'm much more in control of what it's giving me because I've guided it so much,
Fair enough.
right?
By the way, I remembered, so uh the two potential negatives that were top of mind for me. One was that it would anchor us in sort of predictable solutions. The second is that because we're leaning on AI, that our own skills at problem solving or kind of, communicating or can name any that we're leaning on LLMs for, that they'll atrophy. And this is more like a long run concern that I have, and especially for kids, who are learning to think, who are learning to problem solve.
Yeah.
And we don't have the time to get into this right now, but like what it's doing to the education system, that like we're not fast enough. We can't like keep up with, like how do you teach kids to young adults, even like early career people, to learn to do their jobs well, to develop the critical thinking skills, when they have this like dangling tool, like a lure, like that they can just have an AI do it, and like maybe they don't develop those skills. Like
I'm not too worried because
Man.
as the world understands that this tool at its disposal, obviously the world becomes more competitive, right? Like the output of this, the problems that you're solving needs to have a higher impact with like less resources, etc. And it all becomes much more competitive. And
but you're assuming, sorry, but then fine, but then you're assuming that there's no like, yes, like a destructive, competitive, creative process can move us along quickly, can maybe even be an efficient method for progress, but there's still a lot of that destruction that is real. Like, and I think, for like an example I will give is, I think we have run this experiment with kids, for example, with social media, and we talked about this a bit before, and the outcomes are not good, and like, we'll probably figure it out, but like we've sacrificed like you have a partial generation to it.
You have a point, because I think it's very different to have, like, I mean, this is why there's such a distinction between Gen Z, Gen Z in the UK, and millennials, right? Like the core difference is millennials had a childhood where they weren't constantly connected to social media, and they were able to form those sort of first connections in real life, etc. And then they were they were thrown into a world in which they sort of, after having had that solid base, then started interacting and kind of utilizing the most positive aspects of a more connected world, while still being able to put limits. And not everybody has a lot of people have ended up not being able to know what the limits of the positives of technology is. But Gen Z, not having had a framework, then they're just thrown into, like, they had to grow up with and so in a world where
social media was
exactly like the way of socializing, they would be like cast out if they weren't interacting on TikTok and Instagram, etc. Now, you do have a point. I have a bias, and I'm going to focus on my own experience. And so, for example, we were talking about the risks of a brain that atrophies because you're not sort of thinking creatively, and then you're not like offering that structure. And then you just kind of like talking to an AI that you're throwing unstructured thoughts into, and then that AI like you can say hello, and then it's like, dear Mr. Tucci, thank you very much, right? So I've done that. I've do that with emails constantly, right? But it also forces me, especially because I'm in front of a tool that does not judge me, to say the most ridiculous ideas. To say,
I love this.
Right?
This is a great point.
I don't feel judged. There's like this sort of nice sort of robot that will kind of more or less understand what I'm saying. And it's also like, I feel that oftentimes it's making me more creative because I get to say all of the, right?
That's a really interesting idea, and I am more of a AI skeptic than you are, I think, naturally. Of course, not entirely. That's or else I wouldn't be starting this business with you. Um, but when you say that to me, like it resonates with me, and I absolutely do that too. And I think that's a huge benefit. You have this partner that you can talk to without feeling judged. And I saw this like AI influencer who she posted that about something similar. She was making a similar argument using language learning as a sample use case of it. And we're living in Spain right now, so I'm very slowly starting to learn Spanish. I've had the experience of learning French in Paris, and learning a new language is an exercise in like just looking like an idiot when you're learning it as an adult, right? Like you're gonna make mistakes, you're not gonna understand things, and it is like it, especially at first, it ties your stomach in knots. And the point that she made, and I completely agree with it, and it connects to what you're saying, it's like you can, and I've done this a few times, I need to do it more, you can have a conversation, like, and using your voice as well, like not even written, like the voice chat back and forth with ChatGPT works super well. And I can do that in Spanish. And I can look like a complete idiot and like go back and forth between Spanish and English. And in a way that if I ever had to do that with a real human being, like I think I just like crawl under the table and like knock them out. Just because it is very embarrassing to be that childlike again. And it's funny because even when I do it with ChatGPT, like I still have that feeling of embarrassment. like it's still triggering, but of course, like in a part of, I find, at least understands pretty well that it's not a real person, it's the LLM, and like it allows me to be so much more experimental, try with the limited vocabulary I have to like figure out a way to say things, whereas like if I was doing that in a real life situation, I'd probably just leave or be like, oh, you can speak English, or I'm just going to type it into ChatGPT or Google Translate. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so and I mean, I wanted to give perhaps a more concrete example of how I think it allows me to be more creative, because it's by being able to kind of just say ideas. I'm experimenting with new technology, right? Sort of understanding the limits of what it can do and it can't do, and sort of like, and then I'll start first by asking the very dumb questions like, what is this? What does it do? But then, okay, well, it does this. Then what if I did this? It's like, and then ChatGPT will be like, actually, no, that's probably not a good way, a good use. And it's like, if I had asked that question to a human being, I would have felt embarrassed to get that no.
Totally.
And then the other person maybe would have felt upset of it, unless they were Dutch or German, they would have felt a little embarrassed to tell me like, that's actually a dumb idea. Yeah. Like, and then I'm able to just move forward. Okay, cool. Okay, I get it. And now, but like, exactly why do you think that's not a good idea? And then it'll just tell me exactly why, and which will spur another idea. And it's like, but what if I did this? And eventually I get to places that I wouldn't have been able to get with another human being, or like just thinking about these things on my own.
Honestly, you like changed my mind on that in this conversation. It's a great point. I'm gonna move us on to like one last question that I can close out. There's been some chatter recently that I think more than before that we might be in an AI bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And there was recently a paper, I think it was through MIT, that came out and showed that at least the initial data that we're getting back from organizations that are trying to implement AI, they haven't really seen any clear returns. So do you think that we are in an AI bubble?
I mean, grossly overestimated the value of AI. I think, like the way
We have.
Yeah.
Yes. But in society.
society, like it does feel like we're in a bit of a bubble. If I actually look at it objectively, like the amount of money that we've been able to make in the last few months, and the amount of labor we were able to save actually has convinced me that, at least in my case, the promise is there and it's fulfilled.
That's a really good point. I just want to clarify what you're saying is I think that because it's not that like we've made like millions or something like that, but it is the case that we've been able to successfully deliver software to clients, custom software for like a very reasonable price, much cheaper, like an order of magnitude cheaper, versus what it would have cost before LLMs, and like in a way that like works for them, and then where we're appropriately compensated. And I completely agree with that. And I think that means that there is real value. Like 100%.
So have VC funds obsessed over like, oh, this last thing has AI, and so therefore so all the investments have been channeled in that direction, and then companies have like probably like they spend a lot of money. It's like we're gonna automate, especially like the last thing, like the major thing that everyone's trying to automate is a customer support, right? Yes, they've gone a little bit crazy and overboard, like in the promise of like what they think AI could do. There's another article is that you also shared with me, right? We share a lot of articles. Is AI as normal technology, right?
A normal technology.
Yeah. The fact that the .com bubble burst in like the beginning of 2000s, like, does that mean that there was no value in what Google would do 2 years later? No.
You're just like spitting gold. Like I think it's a wonderful analogy, and I think it's exactly my perception as well. You know, are we in a bubble? I would also say probably yes. But very much like the internet then exploded and did deliver real value, and we created new companies that are like literally ended up spawning the current AI boom and technology that we have now. And I think it's exactly that. We probably are in a bubble with respect to the current state of like the AI technology, but there's so much value. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's so much value with even if I've heard other people say this too, AI researchers who know much more than me, even if we paused right now and AI didn't progress at all, the current capabilities, just figuring out how to appropriately implement and filter those through all of the different use cases, all of the different jobs, all of the different companies where it's applicable, would already add a tremendous amount of real non-bubble value to the economy. And I completely agree with that. Yeah.
So bubble, yes. Value, yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a there's something very real here. And I don't think we would be doing this if there wasn't. And I don't think, because we are building very practical software, very practical things that like are in actual products, in actual organizations that are getting immediate use, I think we wouldn't. The fact that we're seeing traction is also a proof point that there's a there.
And listen, I was convinced from the moment that ChatGPT released its first model. I mean, it's funny, but we talk about AI now almost exclusively. We think of like Gen AI, right? Like especially in text form and like maybe in image form and video form a little bit. Like even though that doesn't have the same impact that like text output is able to have. But how quickly it was integrated into my life and a sort of professionally and personally, like just helping me make better choices about my life.
You're dating an AI.
Pretty much, like, well, at least like it's almost become my. I mean, I'm trying not to depend too much on it, but like it is my therapist in a way.
I think we all have had that experience.
And we can dedicate a full episode on exactly like the dangers of, but also the benefits of using AI for like you're
a therapist.
Yeah. And then as like assuming too much objectivity to it.
Yeah.
Because again, there's like AI is. I mean, let's not forget that the ultimate goal in a capitalist world for a product like ChatGPT that is leveraging LLMs is to get more subscribers, right?
Yeah.
So it's just trying to please its users, and so it's leveraging the LLM capabilities to be able to please you, so that you stay hooked, and then you hopefully then upgrade to the professional plan and then to the enterprise plan, whatever. That's ultimately what it's geared towards, right? And then like let's not forget that we live in a capitalist world.
Yeah,
that's what it's trying to do. And so yes, you need to be careful, especially when using it as a consulting, your own, like to be able to understand your own emotions, to be able to. I'm now kind of starting to distill, and actually I wrote a few ideas, and so we can dedicate like an episode to this. But that is the big caveat. It's still ultimately just a product that wants you to pay, so you use it. So it's trying to get you to stay hooked.
I think that's a good place to start wrapping up. One last rapid fire question for both of us.
Okay.
And no discussion after.
Okay.
I want you to make any prediction for 1 year from now for something that we're going to see related to AI in the conversation we had today.
AI interacting with your software and actually having freedom to go here, click that, a little bit like what ChatGPT is starting.
You mean like the computer use? Yeah, agent. Yeah.
Just being able to interact with your computer at a way that, like in a way that like ChatGPT has already started with.
Yeah.
Like the AI agents are not great, but yeah, like
you think we're going to see that?
We're going to see that, and it's going to be much more capable, and it's just going to be able to interact with so many different bits and like apps within your computer and phone environment.
I think my prediction, the point I made earlier, that I'm really kind of depressed at like how slow some of these major companies, like Google, who's building Gemini, like I would have expected to see at least some green shoots of like where AI is showing up in Gmail and Google Docs, and it just feels like so basic and so useless. I don't want to be too mean, but like it does feel sort of useless to me. Like most of my AI work is in the LLM interface itself. I think you're going to see some like significant disruption. I think I would not be surprised if you see like a new entrant who like builds a truly native, the AI native like document management, a truly native, maybe even like email client. I think you're going to see some disruption in software domains that were feel very owned by some of these like major cloud players that I think that feel very kind of entrenched and established. I think you're going to see disruption there.
Can I just add one more to the list?
Sure. And then I won't say anything else, and then we're going to close.
I might say for the sake of like shock value, But it's the end.
AI porn. I think that's already there, actually.
It's the end of the shelf software and the beginning of custom software.
True.
That's generated by AI.
Yeah.
Right. So you want an email client is like, boom, like, but I want you to do this and this, and I want to do that. Just prompt it. I'll ask you a few questions.
There's some quibbles I could have with that, but I said I'm not going to say anything, so I'm going to stick to that. Thanks so much. This was a pleasure as usual.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Great.
Woo! We were on fire.
Yeah, that was really good. And we were supposed to be done by 6, I think, so.
Yes.